Born in Memphis, Tennessee in 1981, Sony Milbrook's life began in the warmth of a close-knit family, surrounded by her parents, siblings, and extended relatives. Sony experienced the kind of childhood that many people dream about, a world filled with laughter, care, and connection. Among all her relatives, she shared a particularly special bond with her cousin Jenny. The two were inseparable, spending hours playing, sharing secrets, and dreaming about the future. This bond would become a source of comfort and strength for Sony in the years to come. From an early age, Sony displayed a vibrant personality. She was bright, curious, and outgoing, traits that made her popular at school and admired by her peers. Her teachers often described her as responsible and kind-hearted, someone who would go out of her way to help others. Despite the ordinary challenges of childhood, Sony thrived in this supportive environment, building memories that would shape the foundation of her resilience. As she entered her teenage years, life introduced new experiences and relationships that would test her strength. Sony was still full of hope and dreams, eager to explore the world beyond her family's home. She had ambitions, friends she trusted, and a natural curiosity about life. These qualities made her relatable and beloved, both at school and within her wider circle of friends. Even at this stage, her bond with Jenny remained unbreakable, providing a safe harbor as she navigated the complexities of adolescence. While her early life was filled with positivity and connection, the story of Sony's teenage years also introduces a crucial lesson: the importance of awareness and support when navigating personal relationships. It reminds us that behind every bright smile or cheerful demeanor, someone may be facing challenges that are invisible to the outside world. Sony's story begins with this blend of light and vulnerability, a young woman full of potential, whose life experiences would teach us about resilience, courage, and the impact of supportive family ties. Today, as we recount Sony's journey, we honor her life by remembering both the joy she brought to those around her and the hardships she faced. Her story is a powerful reminder to value our loved ones, to nurture the bonds that sustain us, and to stand by those who may be struggling in silence. If you want to follow more real-life stories that inspire, educate, and keep you on the edge of your seat, make sure to like this video, subscribe to our channel, and turn on notifications so you never miss an episode of our true crime documentaries. Each story we share is told with care, aiming to inform and engage, and your support helps us continue bringing these narratives to life. Stay tuned, because Sony's story is just beginning, and it is one that will stay with you long after the video ends. As Sony entered her late teens, the bright and hopeful world she had known began to shift under the shadow of a relationship that would challenge every ounce of her strength and resilience. She met Leth Moody at a time when life seemed full of possibilities, a young man whose charm initially masked a darker, controlling nature. At first, the relationship appeared typical of young love. Shared laughter, moments of closeness, and the promise of companionship. Yet beneath the surface, subtle signs of manipulation and possessiveness began to emerge, small cracks that would soon widen into a chasm of fear and uncertainty. The first incidents were almost imperceptible to outsiders: sharp words, an insistence on knowing where she was at all times, and occasional push or shove dismissed as a moment of anger. Sony, still learning the complexities of adult relationships, tried to rationalize these moments, convincing herself that they were anomalies, that they could be corrected with patience and understanding. But as months passed, the behavior escalated, revealing a pattern of abuse that was both relentless and invasive. Leth's anger, once confined to verbal altercations, soon manifested in physical violence, leaving bruises on her arms, her face, her chest, and at times causing her to lose consciousness. The control he exerted was suffocating. He dictated not only where she could go or whom she could see, but also undermined her sense of self, isolating her from friends and family who might have offered solace or protection. Sony's courage was evident in her attempts to maintain some semblance of normalcy, balancing the demands of motherhood, work, and her personal life. She carried the heavy weight of fear and uncertainty into her daily routine, sometimes masking the visible marks of abuse behind clothing or smiles. Trying to prevent her children from witnessing the tension that had become an inescapable part of her life, each day was a careful negotiation, a blend of vigilance and hope, where she sought moments of safety in a world that had grown unpredictable and dangerous. Despite her efforts, the consequences of Leth's behavior were unavoidable. He forced confrontations that left her physically injured and emotionally shaken. Instances where he chased her in his car, struck her repeatedly, or used threatening gestures designed to instill fear. Sonia's friends and family began to notice the signs: the bruises, the tremors in her voice, the exhaustion etched into her expression. But Leth's intimidation made it nearly impossible for her to speak openly. Attempts to reach for help were met with retaliation or obstacles, a cruel cycle in which escape seemed perpetually just out of reach. In the midst of this turmoil, Sony's determination to protect her children became a driving force. Each decision, whether it was moving apartments, seeking temporary refuge in motels, or confiding in trusted relatives, was guided by the desire to create a safer environment for the young lives depending on her. Yet even these measures were fraught with danger, as Leth's ability to track her movements and exert influence left her with limited options. Every effort to reclaim autonomy was met with new challenges, reinforcing the oppressive nature of the situation and the difficulty of breaking free from the relentless cycle of abuse. The psychological toll of living under constant threat was as profound as the physical injuries she endured. Sony's confidence eroded gradually, replaced by a heightened awareness of danger, a constant calculation of risk, and a persistent anxiety for the safety of her children. Sleep was fleeting, and every knock at the door or unexpected sound triggered a surge of fear. She learned to navigate these moments with extraordinary care, each action measured to avoid provocation, each interaction carefully managed to maintain a fragile equilibrium. Yet within this darkness, Sony's resilience never completely faded. She sought support where she could, confiding in her cousin Jenny and other trusted relatives when the strain became unbearable. These connections became lifelines, reminders that she was not alone and that there were individuals willing to stand by her, to listen, and to believe her. The story of her life during these years is one of tension and terror, yes, but also of courage, endurance, and the unbroken bond with those who offered understanding and protection. The complexities of Sony's situation reflect a truth that is often hidden from view. Abuse is rarely straightforward, and its consequences ripple outward, affecting not only the direct victim but everyone connected to them. Her experiences during these formative years shaped the choices she made, the precautions she took, and the constant vigilance with which she guarded her children. While the narrative is harrowing, it is also a testament to her inner strength, a chronicle of a young woman navigating impossible circumstances with determination and grace, striving to survive and protect those she loved despite the overwhelming odds stacked against her. In this chapter of her life, the interplay between vulnerability and resilience is striking. Sonia's story demonstrates how abuse can infiltrate every aspect of daily existence, altering routines, shaping behavior, and imposing a weight that cannot easily be lifted. Yet it also illuminates the human capacity for endurance, the ability to persist in the face of persistent danger, and the quiet, steadfast courage of a mother determined to safeguard her children no matter the cost. This period of her life, though marked by trauma and fear, lays the foundation for the remarkable, though tragic, events that would follow. illustrating both the destructive power of control and the unwavering resolve of a woman fighting to survive in a world fraught with peril. Despite the relentless abuse, Sony's determination to reclaim her life and protect her children remained unwavering. She understood that simply enduring the violence was no longer an option. Something had to change. With careful planning and immense courage, she began taking steps to distance herself from Leth, fully aware that each attempt could provoke further aggression. Her first moves were small but deliberate, choosing to relocate to different apartments within Memphis, hoping that changing her surroundings might create a buffer between her and the persistent threat he represented. Each new place was chosen with care, places where she could maintain a semblance of normalcy while remaining vigilant, balancing the need for privacy with the safety of her children, whose welfare was her top priority. Even as she moved, Leth's influence proved difficult to escape. He seemed always one step behind, tracking her movements with unnerving persistence. And Sony quickly learned that relocation alone was insufficient. This realization prompted her to explore alternative measures, including seeking legal protection in the form of restraining orders. These attempts were fraught with complications, including missed court dates and bureaucratic obstacles that prevented immediate enforcement. Yet, she persisted, knowing that each attempt at formal intervention, though imperfect, represented a critical step toward establishing boundaries that Leth had repeatedly violated. During this time, Sony leaned heavily on her support network, confiding in her cousin Jenny and other family members, whose presence provided both emotional solace and practical guidance. Sharing the details of her situation was never easy. It meant revealing the most vulnerable aspects of her life and trusting that those she confided in would understand the gravity of her circumstances. Her relatives, alarmed by the severity of the abuse, did what they could to offer protection, coordinating with local authorities, accompanying her to appointments, and remaining vigilant in watching for signs of escalation. This network of care, though limited by Leth's relentless interference, offered Sony moments of respite and a reminder that she was not entirely alone in confronting the danger looming over her life. In parallel with these efforts, Sony explored temporary solutions to separate herself from the immediate threat, including staying in motels where she believed Leth would have difficulty locating her. Each motel became a temporary haven, offering a fragile sense of security, though never absolute. The transient nature of these accommodations brought its own challenges. Constant vigilance, the stress of moving children between locations, and the emotional strain of living in spaces that could never feel truly like home. Yet even under these conditions, Sony displayed remarkable resilience, navigating the tension between maintaining her family's safety and preserving a degree of stability for her children. Even with these measures in place, Leth's presence continued to cast a shadow over her efforts. Threats escalated. Confrontations erupted, and moments of relative calm were frequently punctuated by sudden and violent outbursts. Sony learned to anticipate these patterns, developing strategies to protect herself and her children, whether that meant locking doors, avoiding certain encounters, or relying on quick access to phones and trusted contacts. Each day became a careful calculation, balancing the need for autonomy with the immediate realities of survival. And Sony's acute awareness of her environment was a testament to her adaptability and courage under constant duress. Throughout this period, the psychological toll of living under sustained threat was profound. The anxiety of anticipating Leth's next move, the fear of being located despite her precautions, and the heartbreak of witnessing her children exposed to these dangerous situations weighed heavily on her. Yet, within this pressure, Sony's determination did not falter. She remained focused on her ultimate goal, securing a future in which she and her children could live free from the pervasive fear that had come to define their daily existence. Each relocation, Each call to authorities, each conversation with relatives, was part of a broader strategy to regain control over her life and create a safer environment. Sony's efforts to navigate this treacherous period illustrate both the limitations and the necessity of resilience in the face of ongoing threats. Her story is a stark reminder that escape from abusive relationships is rarely linear or simple, often requiring a combination of courage, resourcefulness, and the support of others. Despite the obstacles she faced, uncooperative circumstances, bureaucratic hurdles, and Leth's relentless interference, Sony pressed forward, demonstrating an extraordinary capacity for endurance. The interplay of strategic action and sheer determination marked each step of her journey, reflecting the complex reality of seeking safety while protecting loved ones under conditions of persistent danger. In recounting this chapter of her life, it becomes evident that Sony's decisions were driven by a profound sense of responsibility and love. Her repeated efforts to distance herself and her children from harm highlight not only her resourcefulness, but also her unwavering commitment to safeguarding the family she cherished. While the path was perilous and the outcomes uncertain, her persistence laid the groundwork for the subsequent events that would tragically define her story, illustrating the extraordinary lengths to which a person will go to protect themselves and those they love when faced with relentless threats and obstacles that challenge both courage and resolve. By the time January 26, 2009 arrived, Sony had already endured years of relentless turmoil, constantly seeking ways to shield herself and her children from Leth's unyielding control and escalating violence. That morning began like so many others, with Sony carefully orchestrating the routine of getting her children ready, ensuring they were fed, dressed, and delivered safely to daycare and school, all while maintaining the fragile appearance of normalcy in a life shadowed by fear. She moved with purpose, acutely aware that every step carried potential risk, yet determined to protect her family from the invisible threats that had become an unavoidable part of their daily existence. As the day progressed, the pressures and anxieties that had long weighed on her seemed particularly heavy. Sony knew that the only way to reclaim some sense of safety was to create distance from Leth. Yet the exact measures required were fraught with uncertainty. She spent her final hours in room 222 of the Budget Lodge Motel, a space she had chosen as a temporary refuge, one that offered the hope of anonymity and a brief reprieve from the unrelenting scrutiny of her abusive partner. Within the confines of that room, she attempted to maintain a semblance of order and comfort for her children, ensuring that despite the transitory nature of their surroundings, they could experience at least a fragile sense of stability and security. However, the tension that had long defined Sony's life was impossible to fully escape. Leth's presence loomed, tangible even in his absence, a constant reminder of the unpredictable danger that could erupt at any moment. In the hours leading up to her disappearance, the delicate balance she had fought to maintain began to unravel, circumstances accelerating beyond her control. The last interactions she had, though seemingly ordinary to an outsider, were charged with the hidden anxiety of a woman who had become acutely skilled at navigating threats, weighing each decision, each movement, with careful attention to potential repercussions. By evening, Sony was gone. Her disappearance from room 222 was sudden, leaving her children in the care of relatives who would later realize the full weight of the events that had transpired. The space she had occupied, once a haven in theory, soon became the silent witness to a tragedy that would shock all who knew her. Subsequent tenants began to notice a persistent foul odor, an inexplicable stench that clung to the room despite repeated attempts to clean and refresh the space. This odor became the first clue that something was profoundly wrong, an unspoken marker of the tragedy that had unfolded within the walls of what had seemed, only days before, an ordinary motel room. The smell lingered, subtle at first, but gradually intensifying, reaching a point where even casual observers could not ignore it. Those who rented room 222 after Sony's disappearance attempted to mask it with air fresheners, incense, or repeated cleaning, but nothing could erase the lingering presence of what had occurred there. Each new occupant brought renewed attention to the space, unaware that beneath the surface, the room held evidence of a life cut tragically short. The persistence of the odor mirrored the unrelenting impact of Sony's absence on her family, a constant reminder that the space she had occupied was now irrevocably altered, marked by loss and unspoken horror. Meanwhile, her relatives and friends began to piece together the alarming reality. Phone calls went unanswered, routines disrupted, and a growing sense of unease began to settle over those who loved her. They had seen her navigate danger before, had witnessed her efforts to protect herself and her children. Yet this disappearance suggested that something had escalated beyond even her remarkable capacity for resilience. The juxtaposition of her careful preparation in the morning and the silent mystery of her absence by nightfall underscored the vulnerability that had always accompanied her attempts to create safety in a life constrained by fear. Authorities were eventually drawn into the unfolding situation, tracing her last known movements and examining the spaces she had inhabited. The narrative of room 222 grew increasingly complex, a place where ordinary domestic life and extraordinary tragedy converged. The room's persistent foul odor became both a literal and symbolic signal, pointing toward the devastating events that had taken place there, a silent testimony to the consequences of prolonged danger and unchecked aggression. For Sony's children and family, the room's significance extended beyond its physical confines. It represented the stark reality of her absence, the permanence of loss, and the urgent need for answers in the face of incomprehensible circumstances. In the weeks and months following her disappearance, room 222 continued to occupy a central role in the unfolding investigation and in the hearts of those who had loved Sony. Every lingering smell, every attempt at cleaning or maintenance, became part of a narrative that no one could ignore, a constant reminder of the fragility of life when confronted with relentless threat and the devastating impact of unresolved violence. The story of that room, intertwined with the story of Sony's life and her desperate attempts to protect her children, serves as a chilling and poignant chapter in a broader narrative of courage, vulnerability, and the tragic consequences that can arise when safety is fleeting and escape seems impossible. By early March 2009, the persistent odor emanating from room 222 of the Budget Lodge Motel had become impossible for staff and subsequent tenants to ignore. Despite multiple cleanings, repeated attempts at deodorization, and the use of air fresheners and incense, the stench lingered, growing more intense with each passing day, until it could no longer be dismissed as the result of neglect or ordinary decay. The hotel management, increasingly concerned by the repeated complaints from guests and the strange persistence of the smell, decided to conduct a thorough inspection, an act that would ultimately uncover a horror beyond what anyone had imagined. The room that had seemed ordinary and unremarkable now concealed a tragic secret, a grim testament to the violent events that had unfolded weeks earlier and the brutal finality of Sony's fate. On that day, hotel staff approached room 222 with caution, acutely aware of the lingering odor and the complaints that had continued despite their best efforts to maintain the space. In a deliberate effort to examine every possible source of the smell, they lifted one of the mattresses, a standard procedure in any thorough cleaning, but one that would reveal the unimaginable. Beneath the mattress, hidden in a compartment beneath the bed frame, lay Sony's body. The state of decomposition was severe, the physical evidence of time and concealment unmistakable. The room, which had functioned as a temporary refuge in Sony's last days, had become a silent witness to a calculated act of violence, its ordinary furnishings concealing the profound tragedy that had occurred within those walls. The forensic examination that followed confirmed what was immediately apparent. Sony had been strangled. The instrument of her death was a coaxial cable, a mundane object transformed into a tool of lethal intent. Wrapped meticulously around her neck, passing beneath one arm and across her chest. The cable bore the grim marks of deliberate application, evidence of a methodical and sustained act of aggression. The autopsy concluded that it had taken 2 to 3 minutes of continuous pressure to cause death, a chilling measure of the violence and intent involved. This was not an impulsive act born of a moment of rage. It was premeditated, executed with a cold efficiency that underscored the danger Sony had faced in her final hours. Further analysis provided additional, damning details. DNA samples from the cable and surrounding areas confirmed the presence of both Sony's genetic material and male DNA, establishing a critical link between her and the individual responsible for her death. Investigators traced the origin of the coaxial cable to a DVD player borrowed by Leth Moody from a family member, a seemingly ordinary item that had become a central piece of evidence connecting him to the crime. Every element pointed to a narrative of calculated planning, of a perpetrator who had not only inflicted prolonged suffering on Sony during their tumultuous relationship, but had also taken deliberate steps to conceal the evidence of the final act that ended her life. The discovery of Sony's body marked a turning point in the investigation, transforming the case from a missing person report into a confirmed homicide and galvanizing law enforcement to focus on Leth as the primary suspect. By this point, the trail of evidence, including his last known contact with her, his possession of her car and personal items, and the forensic findings from room 222 painted a compelling picture of his involvement. While initial police inquiries had struggled to locate concrete evidence, the revelation of the hidden body provided the breakthrough that investigators had been seeking, anchoring the case in tangible, undeniable proof of the crime. The reaction from the family and community was one of profound shock and grief. For those who had known Sony, the discovery confirmed the worst fears, a tragic culmination of the months of anxiety, confusion, and concern that had followed her disappearance. The room that had once been a temporary refuge had become the site of her death, its physical space now inseparable from the memory of her final moments. For her children and relatives, the revelation was devastating, a stark reminder of both the violence she had endured and the insufficiency of the systems that had failed to protect her in life. The knowledge that the violence had been so carefully concealed amplified the sense of horror and loss, emphasizing the meticulous cruelty that had defined her final ordeal. As investigators continued their work, every detail of the crime scene provided insights into the nature of the act and the mindset of the perpetrator. The concealment of the body beneath the mattress demonstrated a calculated awareness of forensic limitations and a desire to evade detection, reflecting a level of premeditation that underscored the severity of the offense. Items from the room, the arrangement of belongings, and the positioning of the body all contributed to a forensic narrative that highlighted not only the method of death, but the intent to control and dominate even in the act of ending a life. Each discovery reinforced the link to Leth Moody, corroborating witness accounts, prior history of abuse, and other circumstantial evidence that had long suggested his central role in Sony's disappearance and death. The events surrounding room 222 illustrate the tragic intersection of prolonged domestic abuse and calculated lethal violence. Sony's efforts to escape, to protect herself and her children, were ultimately thwarted by the persistence and cruelty of the person who had once been closest to her. The room that had briefly represented safety became a site of ultimate danger, a confined space that bore witness to a crime as calculated as it was horrifying. This chapter of her story serves as a sobering reminder of the extreme risks faced by victims of prolonged abuse, highlighting the necessity of vigilance, intervention, and awareness in preventing such tragedies. The discovery of her body also set in motion the legal processes that would ultimately seek justice on her behalf. The physical evidence from room 222 became central to the prosecution's case, forming the foundation upon which investigators could establish Leth Moody's culpability. The meticulous collection of forensic data, combined with eyewitness testimony and the broader context of the abusive relationship, provided the clarity needed to bring the case into the courtroom, transforming the narrative from one of unresolved disappearance into a story of accountability, evidence, and the pursuit of justice. The shocking revelation beneath the mattress marked both the end of Sony's life and the beginning of the legal reckoning that would follow, underscoring the stark reality of domestic violence and the lethal consequences that can arise when warning signs go unheeded. The arrest of Leth Moody marked a critical turning point in the long, painful chapter that had consumed the lives of Sony and her family. After months of painstaking investigation, evidence collection, and interviews, law enforcement finally had a suspect whose connection to Sony's disappearance and death could no longer be ignored. Leth was taken into custody, and the weight of his prior history of abuse, the forensic evidence from room 222, and his interactions with Sony in the days leading up to her disappearance formed the backbone of a compelling case against him. For the family, the arrest brought a complex mix of relief and sorrow, a small measure of justice shadowed by the irreparable loss they had already endured. The trial itself unfolded over several weeks, drawing national attention due to the harrowing details of Sony's life, the circumstances of her disappearance, and the shocking nature of her death. Prosecutors presented a thorough account of the abuse, the threats, and the deliberate actions that led to the fatal confrontation in room 222. They highlighted the premeditated nature of the crime, emphasizing how the coaxial cable used to strangle Sony had been taken from a borrowed DVD player, indicating a level of planning and intent that could not be dismissed as spontaneous or accidental. Witness testimonies painted a vivid picture of the fear and control that Leth had exerted over Sony for years, detailing repeated incidents of violence and manipulation that culminated in the tragic events at the motel. In contrast, the defense attempted to challenge the narrative, questioning the conclusiveness of the evidence and suggesting alternative scenarios. They emphasized gaps in witness accounts and argued that Leth's prior behavior, while concerning, did not directly prove his involvement in Sony's death. However, the weight of physical evidence, including DNA findings from the coaxial cable and the meticulous documentation of Sony's interactions with him in the days before her disappearance, proved compelling. Every detail of the crime scene, combined with the testimony of family members and law enforcement officers, reinforced the prosecution's argument that Leth had acted deliberately and with lethal intent. By the first week of February 2014, after careful deliberation, the jury reached its verdict. Leth Moody was found guilty of first-degree murder. The sentence was immediate and severe life imprisonment without the possibility of parole. For Sony's family, the verdict provided a measure of closure, a formal acknowledgement that justice had been served. Even though it could never restore the life that had been lost, the courtroom was filled with a mixture of emotions: relief, grief, and a quiet sense of vindication that the truth had been recognized and that the individual responsible for such unimaginable harm would be held accountable. In the aftermath of the trial, Sony's children faced the daunting task of navigating a world without their mother. Placed under the care of relatives, they were surrounded by family members committed to ensuring their safety, stability, and emotional well-being. The loss of Sony left a profound void, not only for the children but for the extended family, whose lives had been entwined with hers for decades. Every decision, every step forward, became part of a larger effort to honor her memory while rebuilding a sense of normalcy in a life forever altered by tragedy. The family's resilience in the face of such adversity became a testament to the enduring human spirit. They worked tirelessly to create a nurturing environment for the children, focusing on maintaining routines, providing emotional support, and preserving the bonds that Sony had fought so hard to protect. This effort was not without challenges. Grief, trauma, and the lingering echoes of the violence she had endured were constant companions. Yet, through dedication and mutual support, the family sought to transform their pain into a foundation for growth, healing, and the preservation of Sony's legacy through the care and protection of her children. The story of Sony's life and death serves as both a warning and a reminder of the far-reaching consequences of domestic violence. Her experience highlights the critical importance of awareness, timely intervention, and the need for support systems that can prevent escalation before tragedy strikes. Each step of her journey, from enduring abuse to seeking protection, from temporary refuges to the ultimate confrontation with violence, reflects the complex realities faced by countless individuals in similar circumstances. Sony's story compels us to consider how society, communities, and individuals can respond more effectively to signs of abuse, ensuring that no one suffers alone or in silence. For viewers reflecting on this tragic case, the lessons extend beyond the courtroom and the headlines. Sony's courage in attempting to protect herself and her children, even in the face of relentless threats, underscores the extraordinary resilience of those who endure abuse. The dedication of her family in the wake of her death demonstrates the power of love, unity, and commitment to safeguarding future generations. And the legal outcome, though it could not undo the harm, reminds us that accountability is essential in confronting violence and protecting the vulnerable. As we close this chapter of the story, it is important to remember Sony not only as a victim of a terrible crime, but as a mother, a daughter, and a courageous individual who fought for the safety of her children against overwhelming odds. Her life and her struggles leave a lasting impact, prompting reflection, empathy, and a renewed commitment to vigilance in our own communities. To honor her memory, we must carry forward the lessons of her story, ensuring that awareness, support, and action can prevent similar tragedies from occurring. Thank you for watching this documentary on Sony's story. If this video resonated with you, please consider liking and subscribing to the channel to support our mission of sharing true crime stories with care, accuracy, and respect. By doing, you help us continue to explore important stories from around the world, bringing awareness to critical issues and ensuring that the lessons from these events are never forgotten.